Good morning. So I thought I'd tell a joke or something to kind of break the ice this morning, but Gene did it. I don't know how you planned that, Gene, but it worked out perfect. A little housekeeping note for song leaders. We have a whole bunch of songs now that we pick from, and several songs have the same title. Now, I want to congratulate the church because you did very good on that song that the notes did not match. You just went ahead and sang it the way you knew it, and that's just fine. But song leaders, take a moment to review, because Barb doesn't know when you say, I love the Lord, which version you're wanting to lead. So don't just assume it's going to be the one you know. And this is kind of new to us because we have never had this many songs to choose from before. So we're learning. It's a learning process. So how many of you remember Emily and Sam? I see a few hands going up. They drove all the way here to hear me preach this morning. No, they are visiting family, I believe, up here, and we're just so glad to have them here with us. So take a moment to greet them. And also we have other guests that are visiting today, I know, because I don't know who they are. So that tells me that we need to take a moment and not rush out the door after sermon and singing and prayer. We need to take a moment and welcome those who took the time out of their busy lives to come and worship with us. So we've been studying Proverbs, and we're up to Proverbs 8, which deals a lot with wise parenting. Now, if you're a parent and you already know everything there is to know about parenting, raise your hand right now. Jane, keep that hand down. You read the book? You know, there's just never enough. And I was reminded by this this morning from one of the members. You know, we never stop learning. No matter how old our kids get, we never stop parenting. Even when they're off and on their own and raising their own kids, we still parent them. So there's still things that we can learn, and God's wisdom that we can implement. So James, the first chapter and 22nd verse. By the way, all the verses I'm going to read are up on the screen. I didn't have a chance to get it printed out and put it as an insert, so you might have to do a little writing. James 1:22, but don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you're only fooling yourself. Zeb spoke last week about our need to rely on God for wisdom and not ourselves. Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Let's review, first of all, why godly wisdom is so important. In 1 Kings chapter 3, we learn that Solomon asked God for wisdom to rule his people. Instead of requesting material riches, comfort, or pleasure, Solomon desired to advance God's kingdom through wise leadership. Because God was so pleased with Solomon's request, he granted it and gave him much more. Solomon began his royal reign as the wisest man on earth with great wealth and honor. At some point in his life, Solomon grew to love God's blessings more than God himself. His life began to revolve around his wealth, his pleasure, and his adoration. He elevated his earthly wisdom above godly wisdom. Solomon forgot that it is the wisdom of God that answers our every need and gives us true perspective on life's deepest questions. Not some educator or philosopher or guru. It's God's wisdom that provides true perspective on life's deepest questions. James 3:17, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. The need to learn and apply God's wisdom in our own lives is crucial as Christians. Can this learning model be used with how we raise our children? Here's the verses that we're actually going to spend some time talking about today. Proverbs 22:6. Direct your children onto the right path. When they are older, they will not leave it. Proverbs 23:24 and 25. The father of godly children has cause for joy. What a pleasure to have children who are wise. So give your father and mother joy. May she who gave you birth be happy. And you should add he as well, because I want to be happy just like mom. But kids, what they're talking about is you can really make your parents happy, or you can really make them not happy. Wise parents raise children to seek God's wisdom. Of the Bible proverbs related to parenting, one of the most well-known is Proverbs 22:6, which we just read. Direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. Obviously, our children can choose their own path when they grow up, and some choose to ignore parental guidance and wisdom. But as parents, we want to give our children every opportunity, every bit of guidance we can to help them not wander away from that path. Proverbs 22:6 talks about our responsibility as parents to direct our children to the right path. The right path refers to the child's direction in life. The thing many people miss is the word direct or train. In Hebrew, it's chanak, which means to dedicate. In this context, the parent's role is to train or dedicate the child to the ways of godly wisdom. The goal is to raise a child who becomes a mature, responsible adult who loves God and others. Proverbs in the Bible is loaded with instruction in godly wisdom. If you look at the rest of chapter 22, you'll find it filled with words of wisdom. This is a good place to start in training your child in the ways of the Lord. These proverbs make God's ways clear. You don't have to wonder what it is he wants you to do. However, when educating your child in these ways, it's more than reading a verse or even memorizing a verse. The important thing is about learning how to apply it to everyday life. Knowing and applying the truth is how God's principles are instilled. And it's also living what you teach. It's one thing to teach your child to avoid certain temptations. But will your child listen to you if your child sees you going after those same temptations? If you say to your child, don't speak in a certain way, and your child hears you speaking in that way, where's the teaching really happening? Is the teaching happening in your words or in your actions? It's in your actions. They watch everything you do. And if you say one thing and do another, they're not, number one, they're going to be confused. And number two, they're most likely going to do what they see as opposed to what they hear. It's important to be a good parent to your child and to provide them with proper training in life. This will help them to grow into a good adult. For example, these Proverbs show us how to be a good parent. Proverbs 10:1, which is written by Solomon. Parents are reminded that a wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish son, grief to his mother. This highlights the outcome of instilling godly principles and wisdom and the negative results that ensue if the training is neglected. Proverbs 23, 24, and 25 promise great joy to the father of a righteous man and reiterates that he will delight in a wise son. Verse 26 is a reminder that a righteous son is one who gives God his heart and keeps his attention trained on his ways. Now, as parents, there are a lot of mistakes that we can make. One is failing to discipline. Proverbs 19:18, discipline your children while there is hope. Otherwise, you will ruin their lives. I'm going to repeat that. Discipline your children while there is hope. What's that mean? While there is hope. Discipline them while they will still listen to you and learn from you. Otherwise, you'll ruin their lives. So, when they grow up undisciplined, whose fault is it that they lead the life they live? Is it simply just their fault? Or do we also have culpability? Because we were the ones responsible for training. You are the parent. If you love your children, you will not let them dictate to you what they will or won't do. You are the parent, so be a parent. If you love your children, would you allow them to play on a busy highway? Of course not. But what about the child who demands to play there? If you love them, you will not allow it, no matter how much they scream or throw tantrums. If you cannot bring yourself to discipline a child, then please don't bother having any. I'm serious. Because you're just doing them a disservice. God says to fail to discipline is to ruin the life of the child. And who knows more about parenting, you or God? Now let's take a look at King David, a man after God's own heart. What kind of parent was David? As a parent, David showed some traits that are worthy of imitation, but he also demonstrated serious flaws that we would do well to avoid. Consider these brief observations on King David as a father. David did not properly restrain and discipline his sons. When David's son Amnon raped his sister Tamar, David was very angry. 2 Samuel 13 and 21. But there's no indication in the Bible that he did anything about it. Later, we read that when David's son, I think that's Adoniah, is that the right pronunciation of it, tried to steal his father's throne, David had not rebuked him at any time. 1 Kings 1:6. Tolerance and lack of discipline helped corrupt David's family. David showed favoritism towards one of his sons. David had a slew of children, but he made it no secret that Absalom was daddy's boy. How do you think that made the other kids feel? Jacob had made the same mistake in loving Joseph more than his other sons. Look what that got Joseph. David's elevated affection for Absalom hurt David's family, his reputation, and adversely affected a nation. Eli made similar mistakes. 1 Samuel 3:13, I have warned him that judgment is coming upon his family forever, because his sons are blaspheming God, and he hasn't disciplined them. Get the picture? God expects you as the parent to shepherd your children, to guide them so that they do not stray as sheep so often tend to do. If even the great ones can mess it up, then so can we. We owe it to our children to love them. And when I say love them, that means discipline them. Letting them ride herd on you is not loving them. Proverbs 13:22, good people leave an inheritance to their grandchildren, but the sinner's wealth passes to the godly. This verse is very encouraging, and I'll tell you why. It shows that a person who seeks and follows God's ways does have a valuable inheritance to pass on to generations to come. When you teach your kids the right way to live and they listen to you, guess what they're going to do? They're going to teach their kids the right way to live. And it just so on and so forth. It passes right on down through the generations. This is one reason God would say sin can affect the family out to the third and fourth and fifth generations, because once it starts, it's hard to stop it. The corruption is like a rot. But we can take comfort in applying God's wisdom to our families and how we raise our kids, because it's going to pass on down through the generations. In contrast, the wealth of one who does not live according to principles or of righteousness will not have something of value to pass on. It's important to parent your children with wisdom and guidance. Proverbs 20:7, the godly walk with integrity. Blessed are their children who follow them. It is important to be righteous and true when rearing a child. This will also help your children to grow up righteous as well. It is important to be righteous and true when rearing a child. This will help your child to grow up righteous as well. I should make every one of you memorize that and repeat it next Sunday. Did you get it? You want me to read it again? Got it, Curtis? Okay. You be right, they'll be right. Love your parents. Loving your parents. This is for all the kids. Loving and respecting your parents, and not only for the kids, by the way, because some of us adults still have parents, right? Loving and respecting your parents is as important as loving your child. There are several proverbs that teach us about the importance of loving our parents and the consequences if we don't. Proverbs 20:20 shows us that if you insult your father or mother, your light will be snuffed out in total darkness. This could be seen as you losing the light of God. Proverbs 23:22 states, listen to your father who gave you life, and don't despise your mother when she is old. This proverb just reiterates how important it is to care for and listen to your elderly parents. I hope my kids are watching this. Finally, Proverbs 30:17 shows us the eye that mocks a father and despises a mother's instruction will be plucked out by ravens of the valley and eaten by vultures. This demonstrates that if you don't take good care of your parents, you'll be left alone and suffering in life. Proverbs 23:24 and 25, we've read this before, we're reading it again. The father of godly children has a cause for joy. What a pleasure to have children who are wise. So give your father and mother joy. May she who gave you birth be happy. all children to someone, and we are children to God. As children, we can cause our parents or God joy, or we can cause them grief. Our behavior is what determines this. We never stop growing. We never stop being answerable to our parents or our God for our actions. If we want to show them love and joy, we will remember this proverb and do our best to be a cause for joy. We surely want them to be happy. God never imparted wisdom He didn't expect us to utilize. He never spoke just to hear Himself speak. You can rest assured that when God passed us wisdom through His Word, He did it with the expectation that we would listen to it and apply it to our lives. God knew the consequences of failing to instill His teachings in our children. Through Moses, He told the Israelites in Deuteronomy 6, 5 through 9, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home, when you are on the road, when you're going to bed, and when you get up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Let me reiterate a few things that God just said. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home, when you're on the road. Talk about them. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on your doorposts of your house and on your gates. Do you think God meant what He said? Do you think maybe God was just kidding around and we don't need to take Him seriously about that? You think maybe we should reconsider how we teach our children? I know what I think. I wish someone would have pounded Deuteronomy 6, 5 through 9 into my head when I was younger. Now that I've told you that, do that for your kids. Don't make them grow up not knowing that verse. I wish I had spent more time teaching my children the ways of God rather than chasing the almighty dollar or my career. And I wish I had treated my parents with more respect when I was younger. Don't make my mistakes. Don't make King David's mistakes. Be a hearer and a doer of the word. James 1:22. We read it at the outset. But don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you're only fooling yourself. Otherwise, we are letting our children down. Put the wisdom of God to work in your life, in your family, and in your church. You know, often back in my early Army days, when I was addressing soldiers, it would sometimes feel like I was talking to a brick wall, and I might as well have been for all the good it did them. Is God just talking to a brick wall when we hear His words? Well, the proof is in the pudding, they say. If God is getting through to us, it will show in our lives. It will show in the lives of our children. If you've never accepted the gospel teachings of Jesus, then now is the time to listen to me. Hear the words of Jesus. Obey His command to repent of your sinful and evil ways. Confess Jesus is the Son of God before others. Let Jesus save you through his blood. I really liked your analogy this morning. That was very good. I'd never thought about the blood on the doorposts representing the blood that saves us through Jesus. So how do we do all these things? How, you ask? Through baptism. When we're buried into his death in the waters of baptism, we're raised to walk a new life, just as he was raised from the dead. And it doesn't stop there. That's just another part. You will need to study, study, study. You'll need to discover what his will is for you. This isn't a game that we're playing. This is real life. And real life has real consequences. Either you follow Jesus or you won't be happy when you go to a place where Jesus is not after death. I can't make the warning any more plainer than that. And if you think, well, I might wait till next week, or I might wait till next month, or I might wait till next year, it's never going to come. Because next week, next year, next month comes and you've already forgotten. You need to make this decision now, while you still can, while you're still alive, because you don't know. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody knows when God's going to say, I've had enough of this. So if you need to respond to the Lord's invitation, please come while we stand and while we sing.